Marcus Thompson adjusted the knot of his tie for the third time as he climbed the stairs to the airplane. At 45 years old, he had built a real estate empire that placed him among the wealthiest men in Chicago. But his arrogance had grown along with his bank account. The first-class flight to New York was just another symbol of his success, a chance to show his superiority over the common people flying in economy. As he settled into his seat, Marcus noticed an elegant black woman seated across the aisle. She wore a modest blazer and was reading a book, but something about her posture and presence deeply irritated Marcus. Perhaps it was the fact that she looked so comfortable in that luxurious setting, or maybe it was just the prejudice he carried, like a festering wound in his heart. "Bet she's here on some kind of welfare program," Marcus muttered, just loud enough for her to hear, a cruel smile curling his lips. "Or maybe she's someone important's maid." The woman looked up from her book and met his gaze with a calm that only deepened Marcus's irritation. She didn't reply, just went back to reading, but that was like throwing gasoline on the fire of his arrogance. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Marcus insisted, his voice laced with contempt. "People like you don't belong here. This is first class, not a charity flight." Other passengers began to turn, some whispering uncomfortably. A flight attendant quickly approached, trying to defuse the situation, but Marcus was intoxicated by his own cruelty. "Sir, please be respectful," the flight attendant requested, but Marcus completely ignored her. "You know what bothers me?" Marcus continued, his voice growing louder and more venomous. "It's seeing people who don't deserve to be here, taking up seats that should go to those who actually work and contribute to society. I bet you don't even pay taxes." The woman closed her book gently and finally turned to face him. Her eyes shone with a mix of sorrow and dignity that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Sir," she said in a soft but firm voice, "I understand you're upset, but we don't know each other. Perhaps we should." "Don't give me that fake politeness." Marcus cut her off, standing from his seat. "I know exactly what you are. Another freeloader taking advantage of the system." What Marcus didn't know was that several passengers were quietly recording on their phones. He also didn't know that the woman he was humiliating had dedicated her entire life to defending the very people he was attacking. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers whispered among themselves, some clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding scene. An elderly man in the row ahead muttered something about lack of manners, but Marcus was lost in his own fury. "You know what's wrong with this country," Marcus continued, now gesturing wildly. "It's that people like you think you deserve the same treatment as people like me, people who've actually built something in life." The woman took a deep breath and, for the first time, smiled. It wasn't a bitter or sarcastic smile, but something profoundly sad and understanding. "I truly hope you find peace," she said softly. "It must be very hard to carry so much hatred in your heart." Those words, spoken with such sincerity, did something strange to Marcus's chest. For a moment, the mask of arrogance wavered, but he quickly put it back on. "I don't need your pity," he growled, but his voice had lost some of its force. That's when a young man from the back row could no longer hold back. He stood up, shaking with outrage. "Dude, do you even know who you're insulting?" the young man shouted, pointing to the woman. "That's Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. He looked at the woman again and now recognized the familiar features. The dignified posture, the presence he had mistaken for arrogance. Michelle Obama, Harvard-educated lawyer, former First Lady, civil rights advocate, best-selling author, one of the most respected women in the world, was looking at him with the same compassionate expression. "Oh, God," Marcus murmured, his face palling. "I-D-I-D-N, single quotes, T, ... "Don't worry," Michelle said gently, standing. "I understand." But Marcus couldn't understand. His mind was racing, trying to process the magnitude of his ignorance. He had just spent the last 20 minutes insulting a woman who had dedicated her life to educating children, promoting equality, and standing up for the very values he had abandoned in his blind pursuit of success. "Mrs. Obama," he stammered, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know, ... "But would that have changed anything?" she asked, tilting her head. "If I were the person you thought I was, would it justify the way you treated me?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He realized that his apology wasn't for what he had done but for doing it to the wrong person. The weight of that realization made him stumble slightly. "May I share a story?" Michelle asked, sitting again. My father worked at a water plant. In Chicago, he had multiple sclerosis, but he never missed a day of work. He taught me that a person's worth isn't in their bank account or their address, but in how they treat others, especially those who can do nothing for them. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. Her kindness was breaking through every one of his defenses. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, Michelle continued. My parents taught me that education and hard work were the keys to open any door, but they also taught me that no matter how high I climbed, I should never forget where I came from or look down on those still climbing. Her voice was mesmerizing, filled with the kind of wisdom that comes from years of experience and struggle. Marcus felt like a child, gently but firmly corrected by a loving mother. You know, Michelle said, you remind me of some people I've met over the years. People who confused financial success with human value. It's an easy mistake to make. Marcus finally managed to speak, his voice trembling. Why are you being so kind to me? I was awful to you. Michelle smiled, and this time it was a warm, genuine smile. Because I believe people can change. I believe that behind all that anger and prejudice, there's someone who's hurting. The observation struck Marcus like an arrow to the heart. He thought about his childhood growing up in a family that only valued money and status. He realized he had become exactly the kind of person he had once despised. I lost my humanity, he whispered, more to himself than to her. No, Michelle replied firmly. You just forgot it. But it's still there. The plane began its descent, but no one seemed to care. Everyone was absorbed in the transformation unfolding before their eyes. Marcus looked around and saw the faces of other passengers, some still recording, others simply watching with a mix of curiosity and hope. He realized his life had become a spectacle, but not the kind he'd ever wanted. Mrs. Obama, he said, swallowing the pride that had imprisoned him for so long. Can you forgive me? Michelle extended her hand to him. Of course I can, but the more important question is, can you forgive yourself? And even more important, what are you going to do with this second chance? Marcus took her hand, and in the moment their fingers touched, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Not the hope of making more money or gaining more status, but the hope of reconnecting with his own humanity. I have a foundation, he said, the words coming out like a confession. It's just a tax shelter. I've never actually cared about the people it's supposed to help. Michelle nodded encouragingly. And now I want to do it differently, Marcus said, his voice growing with conviction. I want to really help. I want to use my position to do good, not just to feel important. The plane landed gently, but no one moved immediately. It was as if everyone knew they had witnessed something special, something that would change the way they thought about forgiveness, about second chances, and about the power of kindness. As it came time to disembark, Michelle turned to Marcus. One last time, remember, she said, the true measure of a man isn't how high he climbs, but how many people he helps bring up with him. Marcus nodded, tears streaming freely down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for showing me who I can be. Months later, Marcus had completely transformed his foundation. He began working directly with underserved communities, funding educational programs, and offering opportunities to young people who, like he once had, just needed a chance. He never flew first class again without speaking to the other passengers, genuinely interested in their stories. And every time someone praised him for his change, Marcus thought of that extraordinary woman who chose to respond to hate with love, and who had given him the greatest gift anyone could ever receive, the chance to become a better man. The video of the incident went viral, but not for the reasons Marcus feared. It became a powerful symbol of how forgiveness and kindness can transform even the hardest of hearts, proving that it's never too late to start again.